Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette, and our special guest today, back for a second appearance on the show, Terry DiMonte. Terry,
not this guy again.
Welcome back. I want you to know
Terry.
you've spared no expense today.
Thank you.
Ordinarily, it's just chopped liver and Danish. Today, we've rolled out the coleslaw.
The coleslaw, it's quite a spread.
And of course, as you know,
we go
all this is available to you to take home. At
Yes,
the end of
thank
today's
you very
podcast.
much.
Even the chopped liver.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
So we want to start off by
Yeah.
talking for people who don't remember.
Yes.
And Bill just reminded me, but we go back 8 years.
Yes,
right?
well, so I wanted to offer some perspective here. First of all, way back when, it was 8 years ago, the Corner Booth actually has its roots in something called the Gripes of the Round Table.
Was that 8 years ago?
8 years ago.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you. Terry, myself,
Holy
and Aaron
smoke.
would go in weekly CTD
Wow.
with Mitsumi Takahashi and perform and gripe in the Gripes of the Round Table, and we did that for about 4 years.
It was a lot of fun. I
was a lot of fun.
really enjoyed doing it. I
And-
just can't believe it was 8 years
and
ago.
then COVID showed
we had
up.
a lot to gripe about, but then what happened was, of course, COVID came, and we weren't allowed in the studio, or nobody else was allowed in the studio. Then Terry moved on, and Aaron and I were left just wondering what to do. So we started the Corner Booth, first doing an audio thing, going to restaurants around town, and then got into the video thing with the Gazette. And here we are again.
And congratulations, it's quite successful.
Well,
A lot of people watch this podcast.
Well, we've had some great guests. We've been
Yes.
lucky to have some
Yeah.
terrific
We've
guests
been
on the
very
show over the
fortunate.
years,
Yes.
so it's worked out really well.
but we're hoping you can add to those now.
Yeah.
Don't count on me.
So let's talk about this from the perspective of someone. We talked to you last time when you were in the process of leaving Montreal.
Yeah.
You finished your run at Chaume. You decided to move out west. That was going to be your new life. Well, fast forward. Turns out BC was not what you thought BC was going to be, at least not to
Correct.
live.
Yeah.
And you're back here. So let's start with that. First of all, for people who don't know, your decision to go out there, you have family out there. You had been out there before, right?
Yeah, well, I don't have family. I've got one very good
I thought your
friend.
brother was there. I'm sorry.
No. My brother's in Ontario. My whole family's in Ontario. I had
So wait, so Ontario and BC are two different places?
Yes, they
Okay.
are. And I had been going out there for years, visiting a couple of friends
Okay.
that were close friends, and I really enjoyed British Columbia. I would go for 2 weeks at a time. When I was living in Calgary, you could go for the weekend.
Right.
Calgary and Vancouver are like Montreal, Toronto. It's an hour flight, and sometimes 2 out of 4 weekends a month I would go. And I always thought that's where I wanted to be. And I've said this to Bill and you before, and I'm sure people have heard this 1,000 times. If you're standing in downtown Vancouver on a sunny day, and the seaplanes are landing, and the mountains are shining, and the ocean is lapping the shores up near Canada Place, you think to yourself, I have to move here. This place is paradise. And I fell into that. I took Jess out there when we first became a couple, long before we were married, and she said, "Oh my God, this is beautiful." And I said, "When I retire, this is where we're going to come." And we started to look for a place prior to my contract expiring, and bought a place before I even said goodbye on the radio, and off we went. And we were very excited, and we thought, this is amazing, and the roads are in amazing condition, and there's no language tension, and nobody talks about politics, and the mountains are majestic, and blah, 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 blah.
Okay, but you didn't move into Vancouver proper, right?
No.
Moved to Langley.
No, and this is the thing. Even coming back to Montreal, I'm not in Montreal. I've grown tired of cities and the chaos that comes with them now. It's one thing if I had stayed in NDG and retired and was still in that same house, I would be fine. We didn't want to move back into the chaos that's Montreal, which, by the way, is the chaos that's Vancouver, the chaos that's Toronto, the
Right.
chaos that's Calgary. I'm at a point in my life where I just don't need that on a daily basis, because I'm not going back to work, obviously. And so we chose Langley. So Langley, we found a relatively, for British Columbia, a relatively affordable place. And Langley is about a 45-minute drive to downtown Vancouver.
Okay.
So it'd be like living in Vaudreuil. So if you want to go in, and we did. We went in to see the Canucks play. We went in for concerts. We went in to see the baseball team play. We went in for dinners. It was easy to do. And a lot of people said to me after we left, you know, you didn't like it because you didn't live in Vancouver. That's not why we didn't like it. It took us about 2 years to look at each other and go, this is not what we thought this was going to be. We really struggled. It was very, very difficult to make any kind of connections. We didn't find people very friendly. And I want to reiterate, because Bill's article generated a lot of response to the Gazette and also to me from people saying, you know, I love it here and we love to hike and, you know, you didn't do it right and blah, blah, blah. If you live in British Columbia and it's your home and you love it, Godspeed. And what I came to realize is...
You're not a hiker.
Well, that's apparent. I'm not a hiker. I don't snowboard.
And you don't like collecting seashells by the seashore.
I don't like, I spent some time at the water's edge in White Rock, BC, which is very pretty. But it's all of these things I was looking at when I went out there through holiday eyes. But when you live in a place, it's much, much, much different. I didn't find the people friendly. They're friendly, good morning friendly, but that's it. They'll smile and wave. The cashier at the grocery store at Safeway will smile and have a conversation with you. But anytime you lean into, like we lived in a complex, in a townhouse complex, none of our neighbors in 3 years talked to us. When we left, nobody even asked. Like nobody even, like if somebody next door is moving, you just go, "Oh, Bob, are you leaving? I didn't know you were moving." Just crickets.
Wait, did they know you were from Quebec?
That's one of the things that we talked. Jess and I talked about, Aaron. We thought, because here's the thing. When we barbecued in the townhouse complex, when you barbecue, people know you're barbecuing. We barbecued at 7:30. And in that particular complex, you could smell the barbecues fire up around 4. So when we were cooking at 7 or 7:30, there was a lot of this.
So they
What
thought
the hell? They must be from Europe.
you're fancy urban folk. Yeah. Okay, so the bottom line here, Terry, is that you've come back home with your tail between your legs, as you put it.
Yeah.
Because this is home. And we spent years like griping and stuff about it, and you were like all of us, about the city, the potholes, the tensions, and everything else. But the bottom line is this is home, and whether other people don't accept the fact that some Anglos feel as strongly about this place as anybody else, this is what drove you back.
Listen, when I left, and you guys know me personally, so when I left, I was so fed up.
Yes.
Because we all get fed up, right? It's the traffic and politics and the cones. And the languages, especially recently, the language thing has gone on to another sort of level.
Yeah.
And you guys know, when you're in the media, you have to engage. You have to, especially with you, Aaron, you're on a, daily radio show. You have to know what's going on. You have to keep up with all of it. And when you're in the middle of it, it sometimes can feel overwhelming. And you think to yourself, Jesus Christ, what am I doing here? And if you add sleep deprivation to that, towards the end, I thought the remedy to that was leave it all behind. Just go. Stop your complaining and change it. And the reality is, there's politics and nonsense everywhere. There's lots of loony, crazy politics in British Columbia. The roads are in amazing condition, but people can't drive.
What does that mean?
Eh?
What does that mean?
Well, and I'm sure people in British Columbia watch this podcast, and I'll take help for it.
As you should.
I would much rather be on the road with Quebec drivers.
What?
Really?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Good man.
We referred to BC drivers as looking teeth.
Oh no.
There's a lot of that going on, and everybody's running for mayor. So People will stop in the middle of the street to let a pedestrian jaywalk. People will come to a screeching halt to let somebody exit out of a parking lot.
What is
Like
this
there was a
looking-
whole.
Can you please elaborate on that?
Well, I call it looking teeth. You know when somebody's really confused and the head goes up and the teeth come forward? That's.
I've never seen that here.
Anyway, we hated driving there. Take one small thing: car insurance, controlled by the government. So you don't shop for insurance; you go buy insurance from the government.
You can't buy private insurance?
You cannot buy private insurance. So my wife and my car were, I don't know, because my wife is the CFO in the house, I don't remember what it was, but it was well over, I think, well over $600 a month.
What?
For two vehicles.
I'm
And-
sorry, what?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
And that's because
How many
everybody's,
accidents you get in?
none.
So can you imagine if you had an accident?
Well, that's the thing.
With the looking teeth?
So that's my point is, that's not a reason not to move somewhere, but you get to what you think is paradise and you go,
Otherwise.
what? Oh, really? Oh, okay. And there was a couple of other things we found people, like I said, by and large unfriendly. We didn't make any friends out there. The one thing that I will be eternally grateful for, and Jess will echo this, is the people at the Vancouver General Hospital saved my life. And I got the most unbelievable care, and I was tended to by really dedicated, unbelievably amazing doctors who were, the top of their profession, and they saved my life. And Jess sometimes wonders if that's why the universe steered us out there. I don't know if that's true. But what it taught me was when you're away from this and just everything about where you're born and raised and where you spent the majority of your life, you come to realize that I would much rather be, the Rocky Mountains are beautiful, the Cascades are beautiful. I kind of am partial to the eastern part of the country and the rolling hills of the Laurentians because it speaks to where I'm from and who I am.
The Corner Booth Podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowdon Deli, serving Montrealers since 1946 and home of the city's best smoked meat sandwich, the Snowdon Deli, DeCarry Boulevard, north of Queen Mary Road. So I would ask, it's interesting to hear this, and I'm sure it's an eye-opener for a lot of people watching. Again, that idyllic situation that you see when you go out there as a visitor and then you discover, oh, it's a pretty picture, but I don't want to necessarily be here.
Yeah.
With the benefit of hindsight, right? Going back to when you made the decision to leave and knowing what you know now, what would you have done? Would you have stayed here or found somewhere else to go?
In hindsight, I think I probably would have stayed. I'm glad I didn't. I don't regret going, neither does my wife. It was, as somebody said, an itch we had to scratch, and it was something it wasn't what we thought it was, but there was no way we were going to learn that unless we had that experience. And I'm more grateful, Aaron, for the experience that taught me to appreciate the joys of Quebec, the joy of...
Please elaborate on this, George.
Just something more than one thing, if you could.
Come on.
Yeah. Well,
give us your list.
I know it's a very cliche thing, but I'll start with food, and I'll start with where we're sitting. There are I didn't find them. I'm sure somebody will write and say, you didn't go to the... But
That's one of those people driving, I think. That's the same person.
That's right. Yeah, we never found a deli. You never find a deli like this. As I said to Bill, I missed the Italians, I missed the Greeks, I missed the Jews, I missed the whole sort of European color that makes Quebec the place that it is. And I'm not suggesting it's just Europeans that make the place what it is, but the color that came from the roots of Quebec. I missed French Canadians. I missed the loud talking. I missed all of it. And the first thing we began to realize was, and I know where we were in the suburbs, so it's not fair, but everything is a chain restaurant. So Earl's, Cactus Club, Montana's, Milestones. Not that there's anything wrong with those places, but I want to find the Monkland Tavern. I want to find Impasto. I want to find, those places where there's a husband and a wife that are, and again, I'm sure they're out there. We never found them. Even the restaurants that posed as family places, we found out were owned by restaurant chains. And it's understandable because in Vancouver, my view of it in British Columbia, everybody was from somewhere else. So many people have gone to BC over the years, and all of their influence comes from the other side of the world. So, they have the best Indian food in the world, some of the best Asian food you could find anywhere. And, a lot of people love that and talk about it. It wasn't my thing. But I think having gone there, you start to look, Jess and I were looking at each other and saying, it's kind of boring. If you're not skiing, we found it kind of boring. They're just, and we began to talk about all of the things that make Quebec difficult, make Quebec what it is. And I guess that's because both Jess and I are born and raised here. So, all I can compare it to is, you travel a fair amount, Aaron, and so do you, Bill. The feeling when you're somewhere beautiful like Portugal and you're into your second week.
It's a second bottle of wine.
Or you're in, you're coming up on your 16th or 18th day if you're lucky enough, and you think, this has been unbelievable. I'm ready to go home. Yeah. And there's something about, and I didn't realize this till I got older, there's something about all of Montreal and the East, Toronto, where my parents live in rural Ontario, that speaks to me because it reminds me of where I grew up and who I am and where I come from. And there's something very comforting about all of the stuff that comes with that. There's something very comforting about sitting at this table. I've known you guys for years. What the hell was I doing in British Columbia?
But now that you're back here, have you had anything to gripe about being back?
No, tell the truth. You came in today and said, I came in today at 15 and there was no traffic.
Well, we moved to the Laurentians, and our thinking was, again, we didn't want to stay in a big city. We found, especially over the time that we took to make the decision, Jess and I were like, if we leave, where are we going to go? And initially it was like, well, we can't go back. We left because of this, and this, and then we started to look at places and. Every place had a barrier of some kind that we didn't like. And then we started to talk about home.
Well, I want to know what some of those places were. You said this was not your first choice.
No.
Out of the gate.
It ended up really being our first. We toyed with, like, for example, my wife said, what about Calgary? Because I lived in Calgary.
Right, okay.
Calgary is very nice. People are lovely. I had a great time there. It's close to the Rocky Mountains. You can drive to Banff for lunch.
And a food lover's paradise?
If you like a good steak. But one of the things that I did not like about Calgary was the weather. It never gets warm in the summer. They have 1 or 2 days where it gets really hot, but it can snow in July. And every May long weekend, Calgarians make a joke about, well, get your snow boots out. Because when I was there, and it's kind of an inside joke for people that live in Alberta, every May long weekend it snows. So that, I didn't like that. One of the things we missed was the fall. Like in BC, like I'm wearing shorts today and I really shouldn't be. But you guys have jobs, I'm retired, so you guys look like you're working and I look like I wandered in from the Laurentians, which is what I did. Calgary, the weather, and still too far away from family and friends. Winnipeg, I've lived there. And that was a good place to get my start, but nobody wants to live in Winnipeg.
Winterpeg, yeah.
In the winter. Forget Toronto. I love Toronto, but Toronto, I don't know if you've been there recently. I stayed in Toronto. We went in to see a concert in Toronto a few months ago, and Toronto seems to me like nobody's running the city. It's every man for himself. Like the chaos in downtown Toronto is nothing like I've ever seen. And also, who's got $2 million for a 500 square foot apartment, right? So no. And then that's how we're like, well, what about home? It's home. Like, what about going back and being comforted by the things that we loved and that we're familiar with? And then we started to think about Vaudreuil, Hudson, Saint Lazare. I looked out there, and I'm born and raised here, so to me, Saint Lazare was a quiet community where there were horsey farms. That's not the case anymore.
And there's a bridge, don't forget.
Yeah, Saint Lazare, I was going to say Saint Lazare, Hudson, Pincore, that area we thought would look there. And then, of course, as Bill points out, there's that bridge that's in the same shape the Champlain was 10 years ago. Maybe it's going to go in the drink, maybe it isn't before we get the new one built. And so we didn't like that. And then we found this house in the Laurentians we fell in love with, and we pulled the trigger on it quickly. And that coupled with we want to go home. This is home.
There's been a couple of really interesting articles. This is all in the past couple of weeks. I don't know if you've seen any of these. People advising young Anglos, you know what, there's no reason to stay, you should leave, followed by a letter the next day saying, no, you should stay. So you're not a young Anglo, but I'm curious what your take on that is, because we've reached a point here in the province, right, for young Anglophones, talking about what's happened over the last 2 years with this government and how more restrictive it seems to be getting. For people who were thinking about leaving, and again, I know you can't put yourself necessarily in their shoes,
my age, yeah.
But I'm curious what you thought of that.
I was sad to read it, Aaron, because I stayed, the whole time I was in BC, I was still a Gazette subscriber.
Thank you.
So I kept my subscription up, and didn't spend a lot of time wallowing in the local politics, but stayed abreast of it. So I was saddened to read that. I'm familiar with the increasing, I don't know what to call it.
Frustration?
Yeah. Just some of the things the Legault government has done have been stunning in their stupidity and really puzzling, like what they did with the universities. Yeah. I remember I said to my wife, who's at that meeting? Who comes up? How could nobody at that meeting say, hey, wait a minute, that's a stupid idea, the damage that's going to do, and and the healthcare thing, which they've now backed off on. I think what's happened is because Anglophones, especially this generation of Anglophones, they're not really Anglophones, they're bilingual kids. Everybody's bilingual now. Presque tout le monde, And I think what's happened with the hardcore nationalists, they're running out of things to do. Like, they're running out of ways to throw darts at the English community, because the English community has said, oh, okay, you want to protect the language? Okay, we're in. Oh, you want me to send my kids to French school? Oh, okay. Oh, you need me to get this, make a special request to have this document in English because I'm selling my house? Okay, we'll do that. Like, all along, every time they've thrown the darts, and I believe since 1977, the hardcore nationalists, I believe, did these things to, are in a meeting, they make these rules and they go, that'll chase them out of here.
Well, it's interesting to say that, because it's actually not coming so much from, if you speak to the PQ, you speak of Mr. Plamondon, we had him on, and all the rest, it's because they are ahead in the polls. So the CAQ, allegedly Federalists, are saying, well, we have to curry favor with the people in the regions, and how better to do that than... And we had Mr. St. Pierre Plamondon on the show, and he was very courteous, very mindful of minority rights and all the rest.
Well-spoken,
and all the rest. But it's coming from the other side, and they're, like you say it. But this is a game that's been going on for a long time,
and that's one of the things we realize. It's never going to change. There's always going to be a group of nationalists who are always going to wish that there were no English people here. Let's be honest. There is a group of people that think, I wish there was no English here.
Not so much in Montreal, by the way.
No, not so much in Montreal. And I have to tell you something. not so much even in the Laurentians
Yeah.
where I am.
Or-
You know, where there's
or
a
the townships.
majority Francophone community have been very, very welcoming. Anyway, I didn't answer your question, Aaron. I would not counsel English kids to leave. I think, as the letter that I read on my podcast yesterday, the letter that you sent me, Bill, from Lori in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, she said, if you leave, be prepared to miss more than the bagels. Like that's the lesson I learned from leaving. There's much, much, much more to leaving than you think when you leave. And I understand some English parents have said to me, you know, with the name Fitzgerald, my kid's resume is not going to get looked at. And that's wrong and it shouldn't happen. But you know, unless you've got a job in New York City or Chicago, or, you know, you have this unbelievable opportunity that presents itself, like I did when I left in '78. I left because I wanted to get on the radio, so I didn't care where it was. So if you're a kid and you think, I'm going where the work is, that I understand. But think about leaving if you're leaving because you're angry about the politics. Because there's politics and nonsense everywhere.
But, you know, it's interesting what you said. I'm thinking to your point, you know, the idea that they keep doing more and more and more things to restrict or to, let's face it, to upset Anglos, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to get better anytime soon. I can't imagine that. Even if this government was to lose, right, in 2026, the government that might form then would be a PQ government.
Yes.
And that's only, I can't imagine that would be any better.
No.
That would only get, I think, worse.
But I think, you know, especially for guys our age, when you look back on it, we all talked about, you know, my family fled because my dad's job fled and he had to flee with it in 1977. And I remember the fear. There was fear.
Yeah.
Back in 77, 78, the English community was afraid. And it was costly on an economic level and everything else. And then it settled down. And then 1980 came and it was, you know, let's have a referendum and
we're safe.
And then and then it settles down again, and then the economy goes in the toilet, and when the economy goes in the toilet, people stop talking about language because you know, you need bread on the table. And then I remember staying up till 1 a.m. in 1995, and I said to myself, because I was alone, and I turned the TV off, and as I was walking upstairs, I said, I will never go through this again. This is ridiculous. I'll never do this again.
And you're back.
And, you know, so my point is, I don't think it's ever going to change. Because I used to think there was a young generation of French Canadians who were raised on the internet and would look and go, oh, okay, the world is a big place and we shouldn't argue about this. But I believe it's taught at the dinner table. Your grandfather is banging on the table talking about les maudits anglais, cordis. And
but you're not far wrong there. There is a young generation of people like, and you know, who are more globally aware and so on.
But I also look at a 19-year-old kid, or 19-year-old person who's, you know, talking about the separation of Quebec and out with the English, and I think to myself, don't you spend any time on your phone? Like,
it's a pretty small subset of people.
It is
at that age.
It is
who are on the internet every day. And on
but
social media.
My point is it's done this, and I think
and
Quebec will always be that, and it's never going to change. And there's going to be ebbs and flows and momentums and swings back and forth. But I have to say, I think it's one of the reasons that it's one of the reasons the place is so bloody interesting, right? It's the things that they argue about in other places in the country are really bland. That's what BC was for us. BC was really bland and boring to us.
And here, it's never boring.
It's never boring. It's aggravating,
but
and
never
it's
boring.
Yeah, it's, and I think we appreciate it more because, you know, the story that I told Bill, that I told on the podcast, when I stand at the corner of St. Catherine and Atwater, there's a history there for me. You know, I worked at the McDonald's on that corner during the Olympics. I saw my first concert at the Forum. I had my first apartment in Alexis Neon Tower. There's a history there that, you know, is part of who I am as a person at this age. when I stood at a corner near our house of Fraser Highway and 200th, I was standing waiting for the light there to change one day, and I thought, I'm not connected to this place in any way, shape, or form. I miss home. And I know it sounds it sounds flighty. Oh, it's home, and the smoked meat and the language.
But it's
and
true.
But it's true.
Flighty or not.
Yeah, it's true. And that's
why we never left.
I know you guys were smart. And I'm grateful for all the adventures I had. I lived in Manitoba, I lived in Alberta, I lived in British Columbia. But all of those things, I think, helped me realize that this is where I'm from, and this is the place that I love. And we were lucky. We had the means and the ability to say, let's go, let's leave. Because moving ain't cheap. And I'm retired.
Well, so we have to wrap up. Let me get to that. You're retired. Are you? What does that mean?
Yep.
Are you done? Or you just have to sit back?
For people who may not know, I do have a podcast called the Standing By Podcast that we're having a lot of fun with. And since I came back, we're doing it on a weekly basis. So every Wednesday, there's a new podcast. We can comment on things locally. And that's plenty. I don't have to tell you guys, the local media is not the giant that it once was, and the local media, the electronic media, is not interested in anything I have to say or do. So and I certainly am enjoying sleeping in. So some people have said, "Oh, you moved back so you could go back on the air." Well, no, that's not why I did it. And there's no opportunity for me to do that. There's, I think 4 stations left, and all the jobs are spoken for. So I think I'm going to remain retired.
And a lot of folks looking for jobs at all the ones that have closed across the country.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. Terry, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. It goes fast, eh?
Yeah, it does.
It goes
You're
by
having a
quickly.
good time.
And as I said, the best part, you get to take home all this.
Yes.
This is
Chocolate.
real
How
Montreal
What am I?
food. Real food. And a bonus smoked meat sandwich to boot.
Oh,
This is the best part.
This is one of the places.
There you go.
This is one of the first places we came back to as soon as we arrived. We missed it.
That wraps up
Great
this
to have
edition
you.
of the Corner Booth Podcast. I want to thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon.